Welcome to Just a Good Bits. Today we're going to talk about how to cut your cheaper cuts of meats. Break it down so you get tender pieces out of it. And we're going to do two things this chuck roast. We're going to make a steak wrap and we're going to make chili. We'll show you both of those videos later. The steak wrap will be here and the chili will be here if you want to link straight to it. They're both low carb. Now let's look at what we got. You can see clearly we have, I'm going to take the plastic off in a minute, but we have one muscle group here, another muscle group here, and another muscle group here. Each muscle group is going to have the grain of the meat going potentially different directions, so it's hard to cut this in one swoop all the way across this direction, that direction, and make them all tender. So what we're going to do is unwrap it, subdivide it into muscle groups. Then we're going to show you how to find the grain in the individual muscle group and how to best cut it to get the most tenderness. Now I need to center this so you can see it. We can better see the grain now. The plastic is in the way. I wanted you to show you. I got it from the store just like you would. And you can see clearly this is one muscle group here. This is another muscle group here. You can see the lines dividing it out. Another one here. We actually have a little sub piece here, another piece here. But we're going to break those down. We're going to trim the gristly parts off the best we can. And then we're going to look at the grain on each one. And we're going to show you how to cut those. Let's break it down. We're just going to simply follow the lines that nature provided. Sometimes you got to turn it over one direction than the other because the lines don't run vertically straight up and down, as you can see. This helps to have a sharp knife, by the way. I want to show you, these are not straight cuts. This piece is this way and that piece is that way. But I'm using my blade to follow this nature separation here. You're just going to stroke the knife along a little at a time. And you notice when you run across some of the silver skin, there's one muscle group. And I want to show you the grain up close. The grain here runs up and down this way. You want to cut across the grain as much as possible, and if you add a diagonal to that, you'll get a more tender piece of meat. Let's work our next muscle group out. Trying to keep it in the center of the camera so you can see it. I can cut it faster if I'm not looking at the camera. Watch your fingers here, folks. We don't want to take fingers off. Now, we clearly have another piece of meat here. And if I bend it like this, you can see the grains real easy on the camera. So you can see the grains run this way. We're going to cut across the grain, and we want to cut at a 45-degree angle to make those grains as short as possible. The shorter the grain, the more tender the piece of meat. And you want to remove the gristly parts here too. This is a real tough piece here before you start cutting across the grain. If you feel a piece that feels hard, that's gristle. You want to remove that or it's going to be tough later. If you ever cooked a steak and run across a piece of gristle and chew it, you know what I'm talking about. Gristle only breaks down so much in your normal cooking temperatures. I'm not massaging the meat, I'm looking for more gristle. This is a chuck, it's a tough piece. Now chuck is tough because it's a well-used muscle. which means it's going to have flavor as well. Okay, now, look at this. We still have more than one muscle group. We want to cut it as tender as possible. We're going to break down the muscle groups. Follow nature's lines. It's kind of like going down the dotted line on any puzzle. And I don't know if you can see it here. This skin, what butchers call silver skin, it doesn't break down either. When they make a steak or something, they peel that off. If you're just going to stew it in like a chili or use it as beef stew, that's fine. In a stir fry or in a steak wrap, that's not going to be good. So I'm going to look at this. Now, some of you people think that's all waste. Well, if you have a grinder, it's not waste. That could be a little bit of ground chuck. And since I do have a grinder, I could stew this or put it in my chili and cook it a long time and make it, but I'm going to have a little more ground chuck there. And you see this? This is hard to remove. You can slice this out if you want. Now in chili or stew, you could stew that out. Let's just go show you how to do stew meat out of it. That's obviously the easiest objective here. And you want to cut across the grain as much as possible and across the tough bit. You don't want to leave any more of that tough bit than possible. That's a good chili piece. Chili or stew, whatever you're making. Now I want to save most of this for my chili. Get a cutting board centered again. Now this is going to be for chuck, ground chuck, and that. This piece here, we're going to look where the tough is. The tough is right here. We want to cut across that. Let's cut this piece out here. That's a good piece of chili meat. Since we're stewing it, that'll work for chili meat. Cooking it like you would a stew meat. Got another piece here, another piece there. We already cut. We already cut that piece. Now, let's look for the grain here. And you can quite clearly see the grain runs this direction. We want to cut across that grain. And we're going to divide this up a little bit, and then we're going to cut across the grain. Now going this way is across the grain. Let's look back at it again. Now if you look at it, you can see the grain here. It's running here this way. So we want to cut across that grain. It's running this direction. Okay, we want to cut diagonally across, which is this way. And ideally, you want to cut at a 45-degree angle, which gives you the most cut fibers. On the smaller pieces, you just got to cut across the grain to make it the best you can. Now, this is too big for one piece. At least it would be in my estimation for chili. So we're going to cut that in half. And there we go. Again, 45-degree angle. and against the grain. Then we'll cut this into smaller pieces from there. Which way is the grain run? Because at the top, it's run this way. So that and that. That's that piece. Now, let's look at this piece here. Try to hold it up so we can focus on it. You can see where the open slots are? That's the grain. The grain's really big here. The bigger the grain, usually the tougher piece of meat, but it also makes it easier to cut across the grain when you see it. If you ever look at a pork or a beef tenderloin, the grain is very fine. So let's look at this. We notice the grain turns a little bit here, but still basically run back and forth this way. You want to cut across it, and that means to run this way, we're going to want to cut this way at a 45-degree angle if possible. So let's cut it in half, which will make two different pieces of stew meat or chili meat. And then we're going to cut it in smaller pieces. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and split this the rest of the way. Now, we cut it across the grain. We're just going to need to make it smaller pieces. Now, fat is flavor. We don't want to cut it all off. Just the gristle, the tougher connective tissue. Now, this pile is for making our chili later. We're going to grind this a little bit since it's got tough pieces, and I'm going to add that to the chili too, but it needs to be ground first. If you don't have a grinder, you could put this in a food processor and chop it up in the food processor. I showed how that comes out on this video if you put meat in the food processor for making hot Italian sausage. You can view that and see how your food processor can cut this up. You don't want to waste any. The chunk is almost all usable one way or the other. Now, let's look at this piece of meat. If I pull it a little bit, you can see the grain quite clearly. It's running this way here, and then that way there. It's still one muscle group. Let's look at it on this side. And the grain is still running up and down this way. So let's trim this up just a little bit before we start cutting it. We're not going to be stewing this. We're going to put this in a hot pan to make steak wraps. So the tougher fat's not going to break down as easy. And I could try to grind this, but if you put this is tougher, in your food processor, it's not going to work real well. I'm fine. Now you can see the grain quite clearly goes up and down this way. And since we're making wraps out of this, what I'm going to do is cut this way, and it'll make it short like fajita meat grain would be. And that's kind of what we're imitating anyway, so we're going to cut that straight down, split it up, and then we're going to cut it on a 45-degree angle across the grain to give our little pieces of meat. We've cut our meat up. We have something here for a steak wrap. You can call it fajitas if you want. Chili for getting bite-sized pieces of steak, as you can see. They look pretty good. Sometimes you can buy stew meat in the supermarket, and even they don't cut it the correct way across the grain. Here's a piece we can cut across the grain again to make it a little smaller and more tender. Inspect your pieces even when you buy it at the store before you go through in case you miss something. And this part we're going to grind and put back in the chili. We're going to have some ground meat in the chili anyway. We're going to have Italian sausage in our chili. We're just going to have some ground chuck in with it too to make it. And that's it for breaking down a chuck roast into stew, stir fry, or fajita meat, and ground meat. We wasted nothing. Thank you.